I think Mike Parry is just talking a whole lot of nonsense, to be truthful. I totally agree with Yasmin.
Do you think that because some people would argue that actually he has a responsibility to Britain to, help out with charities here, to do work with the royal family, to create that soft power, and actually what he's done is not only abandoned his post, but sort of crumbled that institution which gave Britain that soft power we talk about all the time?
No, he's got a loyalty to himself. First and foremost, he's got a loyalty to himself.
Well, that's not a good thing, is it, Marva? That's not a good thing. You're right, he's got a loyalty to himself. He opts out the British royal family, but then suddenly announces, I'm going on a royal tour of Australia.
No, it's not a royal tour.
Well, it's been billed as a royal tour, hasn't it? You know full well it's been billed as a royal tour.
Check your facts.
So you haven't read a headline saying it's a royal tour?
Oh, yeah, this is the popular press here which hates Harry.
Marva, what about the accusations that he's just spilling the beans on the royal family, that, so he left, he's no longer a working royal and he doesn't get some of the privileges involved with that, but actually all the money he has made since has been on the basis that he is the son of the king.
Absolutely.
And the reputation that gives him.
Well, if people want to think that he's made his money off the back of his father, I just totally don't agree with that. I am positive why Harry is not in the royal fold is because that Meghan was just too dark for the establishment. I totally agree with what Harry has done. He moved away. There's one life to live, and he's living it.
It's interesting you think that there's a racist element to this, because actually this is an element an argument that we've heard quite a lot. Yasmin, where do you stand on this? And the reason I'm asking you is because he has now come out and basically said he didn't want to be part of the royal family since that moment he had to walk behind that coffin, since the moment that his mother died. Do you think that might shine a better light on why he left?
Well, life is not just one moment, isn't it? Is it? I mean, remember, the royal family, as was and is, there were lots of victims. The Queen's sister Margaret was destroyed by the fact that she wasn't allowed to marry the man she loved. And she ended up a drunk and extremely promiscuous and deeply hurt and wounded. And the Queen herself put up with Prince Philip's interesting friendships with younger women. And
alleged.
We are now in an age where we are not prepared to do that. Okay, so I think life isn't just one moment. I also read, and I might be wrong, but I'm sure I read this, that soon after Harry was born, we're talking about a day or something like that, Charles went off to see Camilla.
Yeah, there's a rumour going around that he went to the bedside and said, "Good, we now have a spare." Essentially, we now have a spare.
No, but the hurt was accumulative.
And then with the wife, he hasn't just disappeared. What he has done, he's kind of stayed.
And you know what? Let me very quickly say.
In the back of the royal family.
5 months before they married, 5 months before Harry and Meghan married, I wrote a 3,000-word piece for the Times magazine in the US, saying you don't know the family you're coming into and you don't know the country you're coming into. And the last lines were, the only way they will survive is if they leave. This was 5 months before they married. You can check it out.
Welcome to the channel. And in today's podcast, we're taking a closer look at something that continues to spark debate across media platforms. The growing number of proud supporters standing up for Prince Harry and Meghan, and the moments when those voices cut through the noise in real time. Because for all the headlines, all the commentary, and all the ongoing criticism, there are still powerful moments where the narrative is challenged, where people speak up, push back, and refuse to simply accept what they're being told. And one of those moments unfolded in a live discussion featuring Yasmin Brown, Mike Parry, and Storm Huntley. It wasn't just another debate. It became something much more revealing. Right from the start, the tone was familiar. Mike Parry, who has often been vocal in his criticism of Harry and Meghan, raised a question that has been repeated in different forms across media spaces. If they've stepped back from royal duties, why are they still engaging in public visits, international appearances, and work that resembles a royal tour? On the surface, it sounds like a straightforward question, but the way it's often framed carries an implication that Harry and Meghan are somehow overstepping, or that their actions need to be justified in a way that others don't. And that's where Yasmin Brown stepped in. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften her response. She addressed the core of the issue directly, pointing out something that many people have been noticing for a long time, that a significant portion of the popular press has consistently taken a hostile stance toward Harry and Meghan. When she said, "This is the popular press here, which hates Harry," it wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a statement that reframed the entire discussion. Because it shifted the focus from Harry and Meghan's actions to the way those actions are interpreted, and in many cases, misrepresented. That kind of shift matters. It forces the conversation to move beyond surface-level criticism and into something deeper. Bias, narrative framing, and the role media plays in shaping public perception. And what made that moment even more impactful was the reaction that followed. There was pushback. Not just from Yasmin Brown, but from a caller named Marva, who joined the discussion and made it clear that she wasn't convinced by the criticism being presented. Marva didn't come across as confrontational. She wasn't trying to dominate the conversation, but she was firm. She questioned the idea that Harry and Meghan should be restricted in what they do, simply because they are no longer working royals. She pointed out that stepping back from an institution doesn't mean stepping away from public life, from advocacy, or from using one's platform for causes that matter. It was a grounded perspective, a practical one, and it resonated. Because at its core, it's about autonomy. It's about the idea that individuals, regardless of their past roles, should have the freedom to define their own path. For Prince Harry, that path has included continuing charitable work, speaking on issues like mental health, and engaging with communities around the world. And together, they've chosen to build something outside the traditional framework that once defined them. That doesn't mean they stop caring. It doesn't mean they stop contributing. It simply means they're doing it differently. But for critics like Mike Parry, that distinction doesn't always seem to register. Throughout the discussion, there was a sense of frustration in his tone, a kind of insistence that Harry and Meghan's actions needed to fit within a certain expectation. And when they didn't, it became a point of contention. But what stood out wasn't just the criticism. It was how effectively it was challenged. Yasmin Brown didn't allow the conversation to remain one-sided. She pushed back, clarified, and reframed points in a way that made it difficult to rely on assumptions or vague criticisms. She brought the discussion back to facts, to context, to fairness. At one point, you could sense the tension building. Mike Parry's frustration became more visible. His tone sharpened. His arguments became more forceful. He circled back repeatedly to the same point, questioning the legitimacy of Harry and Meghan's continued public presence. And yet, each time, Yasmin Brown met that repetition with clarity. She emphasized that stepping back from royal duties did not erase their identity, their influence, or their ability to contribute. She highlighted that many public figures evolve in their roles over time, redefining what their work looks like without abandoning it entirely. Then, Marva stepped in again, reinforcing that Harry's commitment to charity didn't begin or end with royal duties, and questioning why Meghan Sussex's contributions are so often minimized. At that point, the conversation shifted. It stopped being about whether Harry and Meghan should be doing what they're doing, and became about why their actions are judged so differently. Storm Huntley attempted to guide the discussion, but by then, the dynamic had already changed. The callers were no longer passive. They were shaping the conversation. And that seemed to frustrate Mike Parry even more, as his arguments were no longer going unchallenged. And that's the key takeaway. For a long time, criticism of Harry and Meghan dominated without pushback. But that is changing. People are speaking up. They are questioning. They are thinking for themselves. And that shift matters. Because narratives only hold power when they go unchallenged. This moment showed that support for Harry and Meghan is not just emotional, it's thoughtful, reasoned, and increasingly vocal. What made this moment even more interesting is how clearly it reflected a bigger shift that's happening right now. For years, conversations about Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex have often followed a predictable pattern. A criticism is raised, it gets repeated across platforms, and it slowly starts to feel like an established fact. But what happens when that pattern is interrupted? What happens when people push back in real time? That's exactly what we saw here. Because this wasn't just Yasmin Brown offering a different perspective, it was everyday people, like Marva, stepping into the conversation and saying, no, that's not how we see it. And that matters. It matters because it shows that public opinion is not as one-sided as it's sometimes presented. It shows that people are paying attention, thinking critically, and refusing to just go along with whatever narrative is being pushed. And you could feel that shift in the energy of the discussion. Instead of one dominant voice, there were multiple perspectives colliding. Instead of assumptions going unchallenged, they were being questioned. And instead of a smooth, controlled narrative, there was tension. Real tension. The kind that reveals something deeper beneath the surface. Because when a narrative is consistently challenged, it forces people to reevaluate. It forces them to ask, is there more to this story? And in the case of Harry and Meghan, many people are starting to realize that there is. Another important layer to this conversation is the idea of independence. When Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex stepped back from their roles, they made it clear that they wanted to create a different kind of life. One where they could still contribute, still advocate, but on their own terms. And that's where a lot of the confusion and criticism comes in. Because for some, there's an expectation that stepping away should mean disappearing. That if they are no longer part of the traditional structure, then they should no longer have a public presence. But that expectation doesn't really hold up when you think about it. Why should stepping away from one role mean stepping away from everything? Why should it mean giving up your voice, your platform, or your ability to make an impact? That's the question Yasmin Brown was really addressing, even if it wasn't stated directly. And it's a question that more and more people are starting to ask. Because the reality is, Harry and Meghan didn't step away from service. They stepped away from a system. And there's a difference, a big one. And once you understand that difference, a lot of the criticism starts to feel less like concern and more like resistance to change. Because what they are doing doesn't fit into the traditional mold. And when something doesn't fit, it often gets challenged. But sometimes that's exactly how progress begins. As we step back and look at the bigger picture, what stands out is not just the debate itself, but what it represents. It represents a moment where the usual narrative didn't go unchallenged. It represents a shift in how audiences are engaging with media. And it represents the growing confidence of people to speak up and say what they actually think. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex. It's about how stories are told. It's about who gets to shape those stories. And it's about whether audiences accept them or question them. Moments like this remind us that we all have a role in that process. Every time we watch, every time we listen, every time we form an opinion, we are part of the conversation. And that's powerful because it means the narrative is not fixed. It's evolving, just like public perception, just like the role of media. and just like the journey of Harry and Meghan themselves. So as the debates continue, as opinions clash, and as new moments like this unfold, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. People are no longer just watching. They are thinking, they are questioning, and they are speaking up. And that, more than anything, is what makes moments like this so important. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye!